My mom said, if you press charges against your cousin, you're not part of this family. My dad looked away. My cousin smirked. I folded my napkin, stood up, and said, then I'm not. And I walked out. My weekend had been quiet until that email shattered it. I was standing in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, flipping through photos I'd taken during my last trip to Glacier National Park, when the subject line popped up on my screen, payment delinquency notification, drone lease account. At first, I thought it was spam, some kind of phishing thing, but then I saw the details. My name, my address, the last 4 digits of my social, all accurate. My heart stuttered. I reread the message 3 times. According to the email, I was delinquent on a lease for a set of high-end aerial drone equipment, leased 6 months ago through a company I'd never heard of. I dropped my coffee. The mug hit the tile and cracked in two. My name is Sasha Lane. I'm 34 years old. I live in Bozeman, Montana, and I've spent the last 10 years building a quiet, deliberate life as a wildlife photographer. I live modestly. My gear is expensive but always paid off, and I've never, not once, taken out a personal loan for anything drone-related. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the financial site. My hands trembled as I clicked through the leasing documents. The contract was signed. The email listed a shipment address. Not mine, but familiar. Very familiar. My stomach sank as I read it out loud. 1814, Reservoir Street, Missoula, Montana. Lionel's place. I hadn't thought about that address in years, not since the last time I visited my cousin Lionel's so-called workshop. Back then, it was just a dusty garage full of half-assembled tech and grand plans. I hadn't been there since he tried to rope me into his drone-based ecotourism startup idea. I'd laughed it off, told him I wasn't interested in flying people around the forests like some sort of air taxi for birdwatchers. I remember him pouting. We could make a killing, he'd said, shoving a business plan in my face. You have the name, the credibility, the brand. I told him no. Now this. I stared at the lease contract. There was a copy of my ID attached. An old one, a photo taken years ago, back when I still had bangs and that terrible red coat. That ID had been in my bag during my last visit. I'd lost it while staying overnight. I should have cancelled it back then. I just never thought. No, I had thought. I'd just trusted that Lionel wouldn't do something like this. I sat down, hard, at the kitchen table. My heart was racing. The invoice listed almost 15 grand in equipment, 2 drones, an industrial control unit, and insurance. All defaulted, all tied to my name. I called the supplier. The guy on the other end was polite at first, but firm. Everything was done through standard verification, he said. You signed for the gear at the Missoula address. I don't live in Missoula, I said through gritted teeth. Then maybe talk to whoever does, he replied. Because you're on the hook unless you can prove otherwise. I ended the call and just sat there, numb. It all clicked together like a bad dream. The old ID, the drop address, the pitch I'd turned down. Lionel had used my name, my documents, my credit. And I had no idea what else he might have done. I called my mom that afternoon, still rattled. I needed someone, anyone, to tell me this wasn't as bad as it looked. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Sasha? Everything okay? I jumped straight in. Mom, did you know Lionel took out a loan in my name? For drone equipment. He used my old ID and had it delivered to his workshop. There was a pause. Just long enough to feel like a warning. Oh, she said finally. You found out. I blinked. What do you mean, found out? I just mean, well, we thought he might have mentioned it to you. Maybe it was something you agreed to at one point and forgot about? I didn't agree to anything, I snapped. I told him no. 6 months ago. She sighed, the kind that always came right before a deflection. Sasha, listen. Lionel's been going through a hard time. You know how he is. He means well. He just doesn't always do things by the book. My stomach twisted. You're defending him? I'm asking you to understand him. No, you're asking me to ignore that he committed fraud. And I'm not doing that. She went quiet for a moment. Then, her voice turned colder. You're the stable one. You've always been responsible, careful. That's who you are. Lionel's trying. He was desperate. Desperate doesn't give him a free pass to use me like a bank. Sweetheart, please don't blow this up. It'll ruin the family. My throat tightened. You mean I'm ruining the family? By reacting. You always take things so personally, she muttered, then added like it was some final verdict. He's your cousin. Family helps family. I hung up without saying goodbye. 2 minutes later, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail, but the message popped up right away. Sasha, it's Dad. Your mother told me what's going on. Look, I get it, you're upset. But don't make this a whole thing. You're the one with the steady income, the good credit. Can't you just handle this quietly? Handle this quietly. As if I were the one causing problems. As if this was just another mess I was expected to clean up without fuss. I stared at my phone in disbelief, then opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. Lionel fraud, evidence. If they thought I was going to be the scapegoat again, they were wrong. I started pulling every file I could find, screenshots of the lease contract, the supplier invoice, photos of my old ID, archived texts with Lionel. I even started writing down a timeline. My hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't fear, it was something else. A slow, burning clarity. I had spent years being the one who didn't need help, the one who forgave easily, stayed quiet, kept things peaceful. Not anymore. They protected Lionel because he was charming in a way that never required consequences. But I knew what he was. And this time I was going to make sure everyone else knew too. I drove to Missoula the next morning, still simmering. Lionel worked out of a co-op garage on the edge of town, a space he shared with two other guys who built custom electric bikes and made beer-can sculptures out back. When I walked in, the place smelled like solder and stale weed. He was hunched over a monitor, headphones on, tapping away at something that looked suspiciously like flight mapping software. He didn't even flinch when I called his name. Lionel. He turned around, pulling off the headphones with that familiar lopsided grin. Sash. Whoa, surprise visit. You never come out here. I crossed my arms. Yeah, well, I don't usually check my email and find out I'm thousands of dollars in debt. He paused, blinked, then stood slowly. Ah, so I'm guessing you talked to the supplier? You mean the one who thinks I owe him for drones I never ordered? Yeah, I talked to him. Lionel gave a little shrug, like I'd caught him sneaking an extra cookie, not committing identity fraud. Look, I was gonna loop you in. I just needed a head start. I mean, you weren't using that credit, and the equipment's not even top tier. It's solid, but it's not like you're on the hook for life. I stared at him. You forged my name. I used that old lease agreement you left behind. Technically, you gave me permission to act as a co-signer when we first talked about the business. That's what the doc says. You're unbelievable. He held up his hands, palms out. Sasha, come on. It's not like I took out a mortgage. It's gear. For a project that you would have benefited from if you hadn't bailed. I didn't bail. I declined. He waved that off. Same thing. I stepped closer, my voice lowering. You committed fraud, Lionel. That's not just shady. It's illegal. He scoffed. Jesus, calm down. We're family. That doesn't mean I have to let you get away with it. He looked at me like I was the unreasonable one, like I'd just threatened to light his van on fire. What are you gonna do? Report me? Come on, you wouldn't go that far. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, holding the silence long enough for it to get uncomfortable. Lionel's smile faded slightly. You're serious? I turned and walked out. Behind me, he called, Sasha, don't be dramatic. We're blood. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the car, my hands were clenched into fists. Not because I was still shocked, no, that part had passed. Now I was angry. Angry that he'd laughed in my face, like I was too predictable to ever stand up for myself. But more than that, I was done being the one who always played nice. Lionel thought I wouldn't fight because I never had. He thought I'd fold the way I always did. He was wrong. I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and typed, Step 1, confrontation, complete. Then I added another line, next, legal. The invitation came in a text from my mom, 2 days after I confronted Lionel. Family dinner Sunday. Just something casual. Roast lamb, your favorite. Hope you can make it. It was suspiciously sweet. I almost didn't go. But something told me it wasn't about the lamb. I wore jeans and a simple sweater. No makeup, no effort. If this was going to be an ambush, I wasn't dressing up for it. When I walked into their house, the air smelled like rosemary and tension. My dad was already at the table, eyes on his wine. My mom hovered near the oven. And sitting at the far end of the table, somehow already serving himself green beans like it was his house, was Lionel. Hey, stranger, he said, flashing that same smirk. Glad you made it. I didn't respond. I took my seat and waited. Dinner started with polite small talk. Weather. My aunt's new hip. Something about dad's knee acting up. Nobody brought up the obvious until the lamb hit the table. Then mom folded her hands like she was hosting a church mediation circle. Sasha, sweetheart, we need to talk. I set down my fork. Thought so. You've made your point, she said gently. We all agree Lionel should have handled things differently. Handled things differently? I said. He used my identity to take out a loan. That's not poor communication, Mom. That's a crime. Dad cleared his throat. Let's not use words like that. It makes it sound worse than it is. It is that bad, I said. Lionel chuckled quietly. Look, I already said I'd fix it. How? I snapped. You can't even keep your phone bill paid on time. What's your plan? Drone your way out of debt. He set down his glass and gave me a look that bordered on smug. We all make mistakes. You of all people should get that. I leaned back. What mistake did I make, Lionel? Trusting you? Silence. Then Mom spoke, her voice soft but firm. Sasha, you're the grounded one, the reasonable one. Can't you just be the bigger person? I looked around the table, all eyes on me, waiting, expecting. That's when she said it. The thing she'd clearly rehearsed. If you go through with this, if you press charges, you're not part of this family anymore. The words landed like a slap. I stared at her, then at my dad, who looked away. Then Lionel, who didn't even blink. I picked up my cloth napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the edge of my plate. Then I'm not. I stood up. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. I walked out of the dining room, past the hall mirror, past the family photos on the wall. At the door, I paused. Not for them, for me. And then I walked out. For the first time, I wasn't the one absorbing the damage. I was the one leaving it behind. By Monday, I was sitting across from a legal aid attorney named Anais, in a cramped office downtown that smelled like overworked printer toner and lukewarm coffee. She looked about my age, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and short, no-nonsense hair. I liked her immediately. "So," she said, flipping through the documents I'd brought, "your cousin used your expired ID and a lease agreement to open a drone equipment loan. And the debt collectors are coming after you?" "Correct," I said. "And my family wants me to let it slide." Anais arched a brow. "Of course they do." I let out a shaky laugh. "It's not just the loan. It's the principal." I told him no. He did it anyway. And now he's trying to guilt me into pretending it never happened. Anais nodded, pulling a yellow legal pad toward her. "Well, you're not alone in this. I've seen plenty of cases where someone misuses a relative's identity because they think family equals free pass." She started scribbling. "But from what you brought in, screenshots, invoice records, the old ID scan, the matching drop address, this looks like a clear case of identity misuse and fraud." Even if the document was semi-legal, he crossed a line. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. She glanced up. "You've already done the hard part. Most people come in here still unsure if they want to press charges." "I'm not unsure," I said. "Not anymore." We spent the next hour gathering details. I showed her every text message Lionel had sent over the last year, even the one from 6 months ago, right after I said no to his business idea, where he'd written, "Don't worry, I'll figure it out somehow, one way or another." "I think we've just found our implication," Anais murmured, circling the message. "That helps. Courts don't like one way or another schemes." By the time I left, I had an official complaint drafted and instructions for submitting a fraud report to the leasing company. Anais promised she'd help me navigate the next steps. Walking back to my car, I felt different. Not fixed, not calm, exactly, but clear. I'd always thought setting boundaries meant saying no louder, but maybe it also meant saying yes, to accountability, to action, to finally choosing myself after years of being the one expected to absorb everything. That night, I went through my old email chains with Lionel. I organized every interaction by date and tone. I labeled files. I created backups. I documented everything like my future depended on it. And maybe it did. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just reacting. I was building a case. I was preparing. And deep in my chest, behind all the anger and betrayal, a small ember of something unfamiliar started to glow. Control. The fallout started fast. 3 days after filing the complaint, Lionel's vendor accounts got flagged. I didn't even know how that process worked until it happened. The leasing company must have moved quicker than I expected. Maybe they'd seen this sort of thing before. Maybe Anais's report had lit a fire under them. Whatever the case, Lionel lost access to 2 of his drone suppliers by the end of the week. His name was blacklisted in one regional directory. His little ecotourism dream? Suddenly without wings. He tried calling me, twice. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail, mumbling something about misunderstandings and just trying to make something of himself. I deleted it before he finished the sentence. Then came my parents. Missed calls, voicemails, long texts filled with barely disguised manipulation. "Mom, please, Sasha, your cousin made a mistake. You don't have to destroy his life over this. Dad, you've made your point. Isn't it time to let this go? Mom again, you used to be so kind. What happened to that girl? What happened?" I stopped cleaning up after other people's messes. That's what. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I focused on my gallery. My first solo show in over a year was coming up, and I poured every drop of myself into it, editing prints, adjusting lighting, writing the captions, the stories behind the photos. Wolves, herons, foxes at dawn, creatures that lived by instinct and distance. The night of the opening, people came, not just to look, but to listen. They asked questions about how I captured the snowfall around a lynx's paw print. They leaned in when I described the way stillness had a sound of its own. And then, toward the end of the evening, I saw her, my mom's sister, Aunt Tilda, wearing a stiff smile and holding a glass of wine like it was a weapon. She sidled up next to me while I was talking to a couple about a print of a sandhill crane. "I just think this whole thing could have been handled quietly," she murmured, like she was offering a friendly tip. "I mean, this is family, Sasha. It's not like he's a stranger." I turned toward her, my expression neutral. "That's exactly why it matters." She blinked, caught off guard. "But it's causing so much strain. Everyone's talking. Your mother's devastated." I gave a polite smile, the kind that says we're done here. That night, I posted a photo on my professional account, just a simple image of a fox in motion, mid-leap. Underneath, I wrote, "Sometimes, it's not about burning bridges. It's about realizing they were never bridges, just ropes you were expected to hold forever. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you free." The post went quietly viral. Other women messaged me. Artists, daughters, cousins, people who'd been through it, people who knew the cost of silence. Let them talk, I thought. Let them spin their stories. I was writing my own now. It was just after 7 on a Thursday evening when Lionel showed up at my loft. I'd just finished dinner, miso soup and leftover rice, and was rinsing the bowl when someone started pounding on the door. Not knocking, pounding. I knew it was him before I even looked through the peephole. When I opened it, Lionel was standing there, disheveled. His hair looked like he'd run his hands through it 1,000 times. His hoodie was stained. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from not sleeping. "You happy now?" he barked. I leaned against the doorframe. "No hello?" "Don't," he said, pointing a finger at me. "Don't do that calm thing. You ruined me, did I?" I crossed my arms. "Or did you ruin yourself when you used my name to take out a loan?" His voice cracked as he pushed a hand through his hair. "I was just trying to build something. I needed a break. Something to get me out of this rut. You stole from me." "I borrowed." "You stole," I snapped. "You took my ID, forged documents, and signed a loan in my name. That's not a misunderstanding, Lionel. That's fraud." He stepped forward, hands flailing. "I didn't think it'd go this far. I thought you'd get mad, yell at me, whatever. But this? Blacklisted accounts? Legal filings? You're killing me, Sasha." "No," I said evenly. "I'm just not saving you this time." He stared at me, breathing hard. Then his face shifted, like a mask being swapped out. He went from pleading to pissed in a heartbeat. "You know what? Maybe I should get a lawyer too. You want to play legal games? Fine. I'll say I had verbal permission. That you backed out. That it was a family agreement gone sour." I stepped back into the apartment, picked something up from the counter, and came back to the door. It was a manila folder. I held it out to him. "What's this?" "The police report. A copy of the fraud complaint. The timeline. The text where you said I'll figure it out one way or another." He didn't take it, so I dropped it at his feet. "Try me," I said. He looked down at the papers like they might bite him. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "I already did." He looked up again, and for the first time since this all started, I saw fear. Not panic, not anger, just the quiet kind, like he was finally starting to understand the walls around him weren't made of family anymore. They were made of consequences. I waited. He didn't say another word. I stepped back inside and closed the door. Not hard, not a slam, just a quiet, final click. And on the other side, I stood for a long moment, listening to the silence. My hands weren't shaking. For once, neither was I. The letter came on a Tuesday. I almost missed it, buried between a catalog and a coupon packet. But when I opened the envelope and saw the finance company's logo at the top, my chest tightened. I braced for another demand, another loophole, another battle. Instead, I read, "This letter confirms that the disputed loan has been closed and the balance cleared. You are not liable for repayment. The account has been removed from your credit record." Just like that, it was over. I stood in my hallway, barefoot and blinking at the paper in my hands. It felt surreal. No bells rang, no fireworks went off. Just peace, plain and quiet and overdue. A week later, Lionel took a plea deal for financial misconduct. Anais called to tell me the terms: 5 years barred from opening any business credit lines, restitution, and mandatory fraud prevention education. "He's lucky you didn't push for jail time," she said. "I wasn't trying to destroy him," I replied. "I was trying to protect myself." Anais paused. "That's a hard line for people to draw. You did it clean." After that, the silence came in waves. My parents stopped calling. No more texts. No more voicemails asking me to be the bigger person. A month passed. Then 2. At first, it was strange, unnerving, even, to wake up and not feel the edge of obligation pressing down on my chest. But slowly, that absence made space for something else. My art flourished. I got an offer to showcase at a regional gallery in Jackson Hole. The curator said my Fox series had a quiet ferocity she couldn't look away from. Funny, that's exactly how I'd felt the day I shut the door in Lionel's face. I started getting speaking invitations, women's collectives, college panels, small retreats. They didn't want me to talk about photography. They wanted to hear about financial boundaries, about saying no, about the thin line between being the strong one and being used. I told my story plainly, no dramatic arcs, just truth. Each time, someone came up afterward and whispered, "That happened to me, too." One morning, I stood in my kitchen, pouring coffee into my favorite chipped mug. The light coming through the window landed just right on a framed photo above my sink, one I took years ago of a bear standing alone at the edge of a stream, backlit by gold. It was one of the first prints I ever sold. Back then, I thought I understood solitude. But now I understood freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind that comes from escaping other people, but the kind that comes from finally, fully choosing yourself. I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness had faded. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because, for the first time in years, it didn't have to be.